Welcome to another edition of Begley's Mailbag. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider, and we're here to answer your questions about the Knicks and the NBA. We're starting off here with Andrew Abraham. Andrew wants to know, hey Ian, I know Malcolm Brogdon is a name to keep an eye on, but what about Spencer Dinwiddie? If you do think the Nets will make Spencer Dinwiddie available if they haven't already, I do know that Brooklyn and Atlanta had at least touched base about a deal that involved Spencer Dinwiddie on Atlanta's side. I would presume that that deal would be on the table if they did move Dejounte Murray, because then you would have a need for a player like Dinwiddie. As far as the Knicks go, Dinwiddie, very talented player. I do think he'd be available for the right price from the Nets. Does Sean Marks want to do business with Leon Rose? Does he want to help the Knicks out in a season where the Nets have been scuffling and the Knicks seem to be in a pretty solid place right now? I don't know if Sean Marks would want to help the Knicks out. I think that's at least an element you have to consider on any Knick-Net deal, but I do think Dinwiddie would be available for the right price from Brooklyn, so that's something to at least keep an eye on. We've got a query here from Cynical NYK, which I love that handle for many reasons. But Cynical says there was a report that the Knicks are open to moving Julius Randall. What do you know about that? Outside of Jalen Brunson, I don't think any Knick is untouchable in trade talks. I can't see why that would be if there's a player to be had out there that the Knicks feel like they have to go out and get, and you would have to trade, a Randall, a Mitchell Robinson, even a Dante DiVincenzo or Josh Hart. Josh Hart can't be traded until after the deadline, but I don't think there's a player on the roster that's off the table for the Knicks. But specifically with Julius Randall, look, I don't think a deal would happen in season. It wouldn't make sense for any kind of a deal to happen in season involving Randall unless you're bringing in one of the very few players in the league who could come in here and replace his numbers at his position, or at least on the front line. I don't see a deal unfolding like that ahead of the deadline. Maybe in the offseason where Randall, I think his value is pretty high around the league in terms of how he's played so far this season. So maybe at that point, Randall would be the headliner in a trade where you acquired a big-name player. But as far as just moving him at the deadline for something that doesn't move the needle a ton, I don't see that happening at all. I see if it is going to happen, it's more of an off-season thing where you're putting Randall in a package here, and he is, again, the main piece going out in a deal that brings you back an elite player, one of the few players in the league, it's a short list, that could come in, frontline player presumably, that could come in and produce like Randall has for this Knicks team night in and night out, really, for the last 3 years. Got a question from Jacob Knows Ball. Jacob wants to know, do you think Leon Rose and the front office are looking for bench scoring or a bigger name at the deadline? I think more likely scenario here is the Knicks trading for bench scoring, trading for a reserve that can help them either scoring or, I should say, defense, depending on how things progress here with Precious Achiuwa. Maybe they're looking for a backup big as well. That's more likely than them swinging a big deal for a starter or a big-name player. I think part of that is you just look at their starting lineup, and it works right now. It's very, very strong. Since OG Anunoby came over, it's been very good. So I don't see why they would rock the boat there unless, the price for a player like a Dejounte Murray comes down to where it makes sense to do the deal and it's too good of an opportunity to pass up if you're the Knicks. I think outside of a scenario like that, more likely is they add a bench player because, again, that starting unit has looked pretty strong with OG Anunoby, and the bench has been kind of hit or miss night in and night out since that trade. So I think if you're guessing which way they would go, I think guess more likely it being that bench option, whether it's a big or a guard. Question here from Jason Meredith. Jason wonders, with Deuce McBride's recent surge, is it safe to say that he is staying in the rotation no matter who the Knicks acquire? I can't go all the way there yet because there's so many different permutations, possibilities that can happen at the trade deadline that would maybe take Deuce out of the rotation. However, the Knicks do have an open roster spot here, so they can trade, get back 2 players, send 1 out, get back 3 players, send 2 out. So in that sense, maybe there's a scenario there where, Deuce is on the outside again looking in. But the way he's played, I mean, you can't really take him out of the rotation. The way he shot the ball, I think, depends on if they got a backup guard. How would Deuce fit with that backup guard alongside Josh Hart? And really, you're looking at Precious Achiuwa at the backup 5. What happens there? Do they trade for somebody? Do the Knicks decide to play Randall more at the 5, which would increase the likelihood McBride remains in the rotation? So I think, it's more likely than not that McBride does remain in that rotation, but so many things can pop up between now and February 8th that you can't really say that with complete certainty. Ron Starr checks in with a question about Quinton Grimes. He wants to know, why is Grimes only getting around 15 minutes a game? And Ron references Josh Hart. And Ron, I think you answered your own question there, because it's clear Tom Thibodeau trusts Josh Hart enough to play him big minutes with several different lineup combinations. He trusts him to defend, to rebound. Josh Hart hasn't been shooting the ball particularly well of late, but if you look at the big picture, he shot it really well for the Knicks last season, and he does so much to help them win games. You look at their overall record since he's been here, and it's hard to question the idea that Hart has an impact on winning, because clearly he does. But Quinton Grimes, minutes reduced. This is a player that was in your starting lineup not long ago. So you bring up an interesting point, Ron. I think Tom Thibodeau is telling you by the way he's doling out minutes that he trusts Josh Hart a lot more at the moment. Does that change as things go on here? It certainly could. But right now, Josh Hart is the big minutes guy for Tom Thibodeau, along with OG Anunoby and the starters. And I think unless and until something significant happens where Tom Thibodeau were to change his mind, you can pencil Hart in for those big minutes from here on out. Will Dorfman wants to know, is there any chance that Knicks trade Mitchell Robinson, Evan Fournier for Dejounte Murray, Clint Capela? Salaries don't exactly match up, but they can be worked out. Now, the interesting thing there with Atlanta is I do think that they would at least have some interest in Mitchell Robinson. Obviously, Clint Capela is available, so they'd be looking for a replacement for Capela at center. Robinson hurt right now. Knicks are optimistic that he'll be back later in the season. And so you have an idea of his health and where he is physically if you're a team looking to trade for Mitchell Robinson. So that only helps the situation. But with regards to Dejounte and Capela, we know both those players are available. I would assume, though, it would take some more than just Mitchell Robinson and Evan Fournier, and let's say a draft pick, to get a deal done of that caliber. And then if you're looking at it from a Knick perspective, bringing in another ball handler here in Dejounte Murray. Dejounte Murray, a great talent, but then you have so many different players who can handle the ball, do handle the ball. Would you have to send one of those players out in that deal just to make it make sense from a basketball standpoint? So when you have that many moving parts, there's a lot of questions to be answered. But I do think that Capela is at least a name to keep an eye on for the Knicks because of the backup center situation. Mitchell Robinson, again, they think he will be back later this year, but you need to win games between now and then. Precious Achiuwa, I think you still have to take a look at him to see if he's the answer for the rest of this season at the backup big spot. That's it for this edition of Begley's Mailbag, but be sure to keep those questions coming because we will be back with you in the coming weeks. We will talk to you soon.